So under fasting conditions, the main fuel source for the body is going to be fatty acids, and these will be converted into energy inside the mitochondria through a process that's known as beta oxidation, or the beta oxidation spiral. So through the beta oxidation, we are going to be cleaving our fatty acids into two carbon increments, or acetyl-CoA moieties. Those can then go through the citric acid cycle to generate energy, and additionally we're generating NADH and FADH, which can also be converted into energy. So that's our main fuel source under fasting conditions. When we're doing fatty acid oxidation, we're also doing ketone body synthesis, or ketogenesis, and this is to ensure that our brain has an energy source in the absence of glucose. Just quickly, we'll take a look at the regulation of these pathways. So you can see that we are at the top starting with an increase in our amount of free fatty acids that are available. These will be imported into the mitochondria and converted into energy through the beta oxidation spiral. What happens then is, as we start going through this cycle and produce more and more ATP, as the concentration of ATP and the NADH increase, what that's going to do is slow down the citric acid cycle, and we'll be diverting more of this acetyl-CoA into forming ketone bodies to ensure that the brain has energy, and then we'll also be converting the oxaloacetate into malate so we can undergo the gluconeogenesis. So that's how we regulate these pathways. Under some conditions, we can have a condition called ketoacidosis develop. So ketoacidosis is a condition where we have elevated levels of ketone bodies in the blood, and because these ketone bodies are acidic, you also see a decrease in the pH of the blood. So typically under either conditions where we have prolonged fasting or uncontrolled diabetes, what happens is you're not able to get glucose taken up into the cells. If you remember back in the case of diabetes, insulin was required in order to send our glucose transporters to the cell surface so that we could take up the glucose into the cells. And so if we either don't have glucose around because have undergone prolonged fasting, or if we're in the case of uncontrolled diabetes and we're unable to take up the glucose into the cells, what happens is we have a decrease in our oxaloacetate levels. And remember, oxaloacetate is what we're using to basically get our acetyl-CoAs into that citric acid cycle, or TCA cycle. So if we don't have sufficient oxaloacetate, we're going to get a slowing of the citric acid cycle. So we're going to start synthesizing more and more ketone bodies as the acetyl-CoA molecules are diverted from the citric acid cycle to the ketogenesis. And so this condition is serious and can result in either a coma or death. So in the case of diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, remember it's the slowing of the citric acid cycle due to the decrease in available oxaloacetate that results or causes the ketoacidosis to develop. The other situation where we see the development of ketoacidosis is with ethanol consumption. So in this case, recall that with our metabolism of ethanol, we are producing NADH as well. So you can see 2 molecules there of NADH, and the end product here is acetate. Through this ethanol metabolism, we end up with a high NADH to NAD ratio, which slows our citric acid cycle. So the acetyl-CoA that we're generating through our beta oxidation is producing this pool of acetyl-CoAs. Those then, with the slowing of the citric acid cycle, are going to be diverted into ketone body synthesis. So that's one factor. The high NADH to NAD ratio slows the citric acid cycle, leading to the production of ketone bodies. The second factor that's important is the fact that acetate is actually the preferred fuel source over ketone bodies. So while we're producing these ketone bodies, our cells are instead preferring to utilize acetate as a fuel source, and therefore the ketone body levels in the blood remain high, so you can get the development of the ketoacidosis. So those are two different scenarios where we see the development of ketoacidosis, and hopefully this clears that up.